we've got a panel and we want to go through the journey of a smart building. And this is from concept to delivery. So I'm Steve Geary, I'm going to host the panel, and I'm the Managing Director at One Sightsolutions. I'd like to introduce you to the panel. Would you like to introduce yourselves? Fiona?
Hi everyone, my name is Fiona Sawkill and I head up the digital placemaking team at British Land. And what that means is I'm responsible for the design and delivery of digital services and products to the built environment.
Thanks. My name is John Clarke. I'm the Operations Director at One Sightsolutions. So it's my team that actually does the smart enablement, the MSI role. So we're actually delivering the projects out in the field.
Hi, I'm Karen Warner from Arup. I'm a smart building consultant. And similar to Fiona, that means that we are working straight from the concept through to designing to enable our clients to reach their aspirations, and then handing it over to these guys to deliver.
Hi everyone, I'm Mick Davidson. I work for Skanska Construction, part of their building services division. I'm a specialist business director, and I head up business we call Skanska Network Solutions.
Thanks very much, guys. So my first question is going to be to you, Fiona, and it's going to be, as a building owner, why would you want a smart building, and what considerations do you need to make when you're deciding this?
Okay, so for British Land, the reasons why fall into three categories. As we talk about insights, efficiency and experience. And for insights, a smart building allows us to derive insights that have not been previously possible. And so we start to understand how the building is being used, how it's performing, how the devices within it are performing. And that allows us to get insights that we haven't had before. What that allows us to do longer term is understand the building health and look at our procurement strategy and our future design strategy. We also use insights, so we correlate all of the different data sets together, and we use that insight to improve our building performance with the intention to reduce our operational carbon. So the things that we look at, so we look at meeting room booking data, occupancy, sensor data, other data, and we look at that, and what we're moving towards is from a time scheduled basis to a occupancy based strategy. The other thing that leads to, so that moves us on to efficiency. So efficiency for us covers, as I say, our sustainability targets. How can we make the building perform in a more efficient way? But more than that, it's also how do we improve our own processes? So for example, how do we use digital data to do the daily plant checks? So can we do a digital audit? So instead of somebody going around manually doing it, can we do it digitally and just report by exception? We take data and we're starting to look at predictive and preventative maintenance, and that will also lead into then improving the experience for the people who work in our buildings. And for the experience side, that falls for us, it falls into two camps. So we look at it from a kind of experience software level in terms of how people engage with the space, how they engage with the community, how they understand what's happening. So we look at news and offers and events. And then we look at how we can enhance the space based on occupancy, as I said before, but air quality. How do we improve the space for productivity and for well-being? So they're the three kind of key points.
Thanks, Fiona. I would say that British Land are experienced in this. You've had lots of projects now. I guess my question would be to you, Karen. Working with British Land is probably very different in how you might work with a client that maybe wants a smart building but doesn't necessarily know what a smart building is. How would you work as a consultant with a customer to try to ensure that you can articulate what it is that they require?
Yes, it's actually very interesting, working with clients such as British Land who already have developed, and what Fiona was describing there were a number of use cases. Often clients will come to us and they say we want a smart building, but they don't really know what that is, or they might have an idea of a single aspect of it. Is that something that, because the tenants would have an app that they can use on their mobile phone or something, So what we do is we work with our clients to try and explore the possibilities with them. We start very early on in the design phase. In stages 2 and 3, we would be working through interview and with user journey workshops to identify the opportunities and identify the use cases that would be used in that building. And then from there we develop an opportunities matrix where we then work with the client to decide which opportunities are actually going to be used in that building. So which ones do we want on day one? Which ones do we want to be enabled for future? Which ones might we discount altogether? And that gives us a basis to understand what we're working on, a framework, and from there we can then go on and develop the more detailed designs. It's really important to go through that phase with them too, so that we establish right at the outset exactly what it is we want to achieve from that building and make sure it's future-proof.
And regarding technology, when you're looking at these specifications and putting it together, are you keeping that pretty standard across all customers? So when we look on a lot of projects we've worked on, there's converged networks now that lots of the equipment's being put on. Is that something similar to what you do across those three aspects?
This is my hobby horse. I'm sort of trying not to step on my soapbox here. There are a lot of buildings that are still going in with siloed building networks, and of course the first thing that we want is a converged network. To get to that, of course, we need to look at the capabilities of the devices and how secure they are to sit on that network. So we would have a requirement for all devices to comply with certain network criteria. We would also be looking at how that data comes out of those devices. So we'd be looking at standardised ways of naming the assets, of developing the points that go into those controllers, and standardised ways of getting the data out. So we would be working with JSON payloads over MQTT, but the format of that payload should be defined, and we work on that basis for all equipment. That way the data is normalised in the building, which makes it a scalable solution. So we're looking at scalability, flexibility and security of the devices that are in that building, which enables it then allows you to use applications and convert them into different buildings.
Thanks. John, I wonder if you can elaborate on what it is you have to do as an MSI.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that whole piece is really one of the probably earliest stage, the earliest type of engagement we have to deal with as an MSI, is understanding that, I guess, how that converged network, how that managed network is actually going to be spread across the building, and anything that's going to sit on that network, we do a lot of fairly intricate testing on each one of those devices to see, can it do DHCP, can it do DNS, can you lock down certain ports on the devices to really kind of harden and secure these devices, because as much as there is a push to put stuff on the managed network, because if you just put most of this equipment actually on there, what you'll find is you're just going to be opening up security holes. So it's really critical that you can get that testing piece working. And it's our work to do the next level of testing. If we're going to integrate, we're going to talk to a device. Can it talk MQTT? That's the kind of dream that people are trying to do at the moment. But just because a device talks MQTT, can it connect via certificates? Can you connect it securely? Can you actually modify the payload? So when you're following a UDMI standard, when you've got your own set standard, these are all kind of things that we have to interrogate on these devices and assets, and really understand what's going to be, not only what devices you're integrating with, but even devices that you're not. What is the risk profile of that network? So what devices are out there that you need to be aware of. Yeah.
So my next question now is going to be for Mick. My question for you, Mick, is going to be, at what stage as a contractor do you feel you need to engage with an MSI? And probably why you engage with an MSI?
Yeah, as early as possible is the short answer, but I think it does depend on how informed the client and his professional team are. In the case of British Land and Arup, this is their third generation projects, and you see the specification and scope documents, they're very, very clear. They have a smart building specification, they have a naming schema, and more to the point, which is coming back to your question, is they have an appendices for each base build system, which is very important to us because in the other world, a less informed client, the specification is very jumbled up with day one, day two requirements, and the base build system specifications, their scope documents mention smart but don't give them a get out. So we really need someone to support the team to ensure that the base build systems are doing everything exposing their point data for you guys to be able to do it, and they're not going to be charging us later on for the scope gap.
So I guess coming on to that point of charging, then what risks are associated with this from your side, and also what costs does this impact as well?
Well, there's a number of risks at the early stage. I mean, the first thing is literally the fact that everything's got a cost plan and a business case associated around it, and the client has a cost consultant that has told them exactly how much the building will cost to develop. Sometimes it's missed, and the cost plan is blown, and then what happens there is there's looked for a value engineering exercise where we can see where we can save costs and bring it down. Certain targets are then aimed at, and one of them is the BIM. It often happens that the model is brought down from a level 2 to probably what we call selfish BIM, which is just enough for us to build the building, but not contractually handing over any of the data that links to the model. So there isn't essentially an asset database as part of that. So that's one of the value engineering exercises. But there are good value engineering exercises. We just need to make sure that you guys can validate them so that they're pure savings.
Okay, so this question now probably goes on to all of you, because I'm sure you'll all have your own opinions about this. It's going to be based on technology moves. These are a lot of projects. When you put your scope together to actually when it gets delivered, at what point through that process, as technology changes, do you potentially change your specifications and your wants and your needs? And probably start with yourself as the client.
Yeah, so that's been really tricky for us. So as Mick said, we started off with our Smart Building Design Guide version 1 and the various iterations of that. And then my wonderful colleague Lyndon came along, and we realised that the Smart Building Design Guide we first issued really covered what we thought smart building was, and we were very proud of that because we felt like we'd actually understood what we wanted to deliver, but it didn't then describe how to deliver it, and we needed then to go to the next version of that. So we're now on version 2.2, but that's been really hard because what we've had to do is then retrospectively put that into the contract for the developments that are underway. Excuse me. So it has been difficult, but some of the decisions that we're taking is for the end sensors or some of the end bits of kit. That's my non-techie version of it. We wait to make those decisions later. So we put all the containment in, the cabling in, and then make those decisions, say about a year, 18 months out. And we've changed the risk profile in terms of the cost model now as well. So we've included additional contingency for tech changes. Likewise for the Smart Building Design Guide, we've now realised this is going to continue to develop, and so therefore we need a bit of contingency in all of our development budgets to cater for that.
Yeah, I think we see quite a lot of that change that we've worked on a few projects and some with British Land where let's talk about a lighting system we're going to integrate with from day one. We know we can receive the points via backlit. It's not as ideal as we want it. Ideally it would be talking MQTT, but then during the course of the projects, a lot of these companies are developing their tech and APIs coming out, or maybe MQTT drivers, and it's really we have to be fairly flexible as a technology company to, if it's going to offer the benefit of what the end client wants, and we can, it might be a little bit more time and effort, but actually, we have to adapt to that technology. We've had to make quite a lot of last minute changes, and because of that, you have to. And sometimes when you're pricing these jobs, even from an MSI point, you're not necessarily going to know what technology it is on day one and how you're going to integrate. So, you have to bake in a certain amount of risk into that anyway. So as long as there is a potential for it to change, I think you can kind of kind of float with the waves a little bit on that one and tweak them as you need to.
I think Fiona talked a little bit about it, leaving the procurement of the devices to the last viable moment. So obviously there's a price baked in, which I know you're really interested in. But you know, we know what a line item is, but let's not sign in blood that it's that particular device that we're going to buy. It's a device with that capability, you know, that performs that mechanical, that electrical functionality that we want. Smart requirements need to be given equal weighting. I don't think they always are. And we need to, and the other way we tackle this is we are constantly engaging with manufacturers, asking them about what's on their roadmap, pleading with them to put things on their roadmap. So often we know what's coming up, and of course then John's team have to check that it does what it says on the tin. But if we sort of use a multiple stream approach on that, the other really important thing is that how the device can do firmware updates. So you don't have to throw away everything to get the latest and best, as long as we can get the firmware update on that hardware. So actually being able to get firmware updates down the wire or over the air, rather than having to go and plug into, you know, to a few hundred devices, is probably not the way we want to go either. So those sorts of things are the things that we write into our requirements for the devices to try and future-proof over the length of a construction contract.
Have you got anything to add on that, Mick?
Really? Yeah. That's a slightly different angle, really. Obviously, we are under contract and we're under a fixed price contract, so the element of fixing the design is very important to us, particularly the base build systems. So we look to place orders as soon as we can to fix the commodities that they have a risk against. Conversely, though, the smart enablement and the MSI role, it kind of frees up the future in many ways. The hardware stays the same, but we've got the data, and the data is in a condition that's going out into a cloud that has another 3 years worth of development before we actually commit to how we're going to use that data. So I kind of see that there's a fixed price element. IoT really helps to provide sensors against this hardware so we can increase its functionality, but the development of the software is the thing that really extends the life cycle.
To move on to the building's been smart enabled. As you walk around the show, you see lots and lots of software vendors now that are coming that give you the use cases that you want. The question probably now goes to you, Karen, about where that data sits and where it should be modeled. Is it in the software parties, or is it on site?
So really important to us is that the client retains ownership of the data. So first and foremost, we must go with that. Having an on-prem broker helps that you can decouple from the cloud, and it makes buildings more portable. It also makes sure that the client retains their data. I think the most important thing for us is that data is in an open format. It's all used in the same format, so that actually, if there's a better application comes along at a later date, the client can use that application. They're not locked to the platform where they've done some translation in that platform. So very much we're all about making sure that the client has the data, it's an open format, and they can do whatever they want with it. If they sell the building, that can be transferred across, and the new owner doesn't need to lose anything because that data is open and they can apply their own applications. That would be our approach every time.
Thank you. Moving on now to standards. We're seeing lots of standards coming out. How are potentially some of those standards maybe driving some of the design, some of the impact? I'll come to you to start with, Karen, and then probably to touch on as well.
Yeah, it's working. Some of the standards that are coming out, we've actually helped to develop, British Land have helped to develop. So open naming standards such as BPNS, there's other standards out there such as DBO, UDMI, which are talking about how the point names go together, how the payloads are constructed, and actually how the relationships of those devices go together. In an ideal world, everybody adopts the same, because that would be really great. All of these standards are open source, anybody can contribute to them. So all of this is available on GitHub, because it's not a black box, it's there for everyone to contribute to buy into, and to make better. And I think the industry will be better as a whole for actually standardising on this.
And Mick, what about some of the standards maybe around well, neighbours?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few standards around, BREEAM, lead, those sort of things. They're very much fixed around the design of the building and some aspects to the location of the building. The one for me at the moment is design for performance. That's neighbours, as you may know it. It's actually, rather than designing to a theoretical performance, it's measuring it real time, not just on practical completion, but 2 years after, once the building starts to get loaded up and actually has tenants that are using it. So that can give you a real time data. And the exciting thing about that is it's going to need someone to read that information, right? So that gives you a module that needs some smart implementation.
So I guess, Fiona, as the landlord, I guess they help you as well?
Sorry, say again?
I guess they help you as well with regards to wanting to make the floor space more saleable to your tenants?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, there's two sides of this. One side we haven't covered, which I'll pick up. The approach that we're taking as well, we want to be really user-centric. So, and I think Karen, you touched on the fact that we have use cases. So for us, it's really important that it is about the user experience. It's about what comes out of it rather than just the technology, especially when we engage with our customers. So it's the outputs rather than the inputs that we talk to them about. And in terms of BREEAM and neighbours, yes, we're having a lot of interest in that. People are beginning to expect it from us now. And in fact, the conversation starts along those lines. And I think sustainability has really helped drive our smart building strategy and their own smart building strategy as well. And we're finding that the conversation has moved on for the last couple of years, where now they are interested in how we share data between the landlord and their space as well, how we operate the building as a whole unit rather than as individual entities. So things have moved on a lot.
Thank you. John, so as we get towards an end of a project, what considerations do you need to think about with regards to handover and validation?
Yeah, so handover with as soon as you're smart enabling, you're effectively adding certain layers to some of this data. So you're connecting to a HVAC system, a lighting system, making sure that the data is normalised and connecting it, via whatever protocol you've picked. Really critical is continuing a change control process there. So quite a lot of times we've seen goal is get PC handover, get everything ticked off, but if day two the on-site FM team start changing names of the system down below and maybe moving stuff around and you're not informed as an MSI or as part of that chain, then quite quickly the data becomes a bit of garbage really, because someone's moved the camera, someone's moved the light fitting. So the kind of continual engagement really with the facilities team, with the end client is key for us. So making sure there's a full change control process, and that's whether there is a cloud platform at the end or not. On day one, it's not always there, but if you don't have that in place, then the data quite quickly falls apart. We've seen that on quite a few live projects where if we're not kept engaged and that change does happen, then quickly you've got two systems that have gone off in different directions. So just change control is key. Communication, change control with the facilities team on the client side.
Thanks, John. Mick, does that cause additional challenges or hurdles for yourselves as a contractor as well, with the handover now of having to go through and validate with the smart data?
Yeah, the validation process it's in during the commissioning program, obviously, but I think the issue you have is the commissioning has to finish before the validation can finish. So if you're saying every asset is being seen in the cloud, well, we need every asset to be commissioned by them. So then there needs to be a period before PC that is just you validating. So there needs to be everyone finished and you're doing a validation. A lot of clients put it in a soft landing program, so it's post PC and they can say everything hardware is signed off, everything is working as it should. Now we validate, we can see the data. But it's still, we're quite infancy in the construction world, knowing that a project is 3 to 4 years from concept to birth, and there's a lot of projects not finished yet that are going through this process. There's lots to learn.
So Fiona, we've got PC, we're moving on. It's the day two. It's the day two work. So you've got your building. I guess how does that help you guys now that you've successfully completed these projects? You're working with multiple vendors.
Yes, so actually our aspiration going forward is that we do what we call digital commissioning. So after practical completion, that we do run all of these digital checks and make sure that things are commissioned and devices are performing as they're expected. Because on some of the projects already we found that that's not quite the case. So that's been important.
Well, that's been really useful. Thanks for today. I'd like to open up questions to the floor. If anybody's got any questions for any of the panel.
That's been really interesting. Thank you very much. I've got a question for you, Fiona. So this is great that you've been doing this on all of your new construction with all of these standards. Could you tell us a bit about what you're thinking in terms of your existing portfolio and those in operation buildings?
Yeah, sure. So actually, that's a really good question, really timely for us as well. So the next project that we're doing, so the first project we did, I should say, is 100 Liverpool Street, which was smart by design. So secure by design, smart by design. So actually we had a bit of a head start there. The next 3 that we're doing are retrospective fit outs, but the principle we're taking is the same. So although we know that some of the old systems, we won't be able to get the data that we want, we still want to have the same principle that Karen has described. So we still want to have that translation there. We want to have the MQTT broker on premise, and then to send the data up to the cloud in the format that we've specified. Because British Land, we're taking a whole portfolio approach to this, and we want every building to have the same naming convention and to all feed into one platform so that we can start to compare, contrast, understand nuances of buildings, how it works for our different occupiers, our different tenants, etc. So it's going to be different, but the approach we're taking is the same, although we know we're going to be limited on some of our use cases just because of old technologies, basically.
Hi, I'm not sure if it's a question for Fiona or Mick or Karen, but basically I think Reba are developing a BIM overlay for smart buildings on their plan of works. But do you also think that value engineering is going to have to be rethought, given that a building just doesn't end at practical completion?
Short answer for me is yes. and that's a very live conversation that we're having as well. And so we're finding that decisions are taken as part of the project, where sensors are removed, for example, or and so we're not going to be able to deliver all of our use cases. So what we're trying to do at British Land is change the way that we manage the whole process so that the digital placemaking team are part of those decisions, and we can say what the impact of those decisions is from a use case perspective, and then we can have that open conversation, because sometimes that is going to be the case and we just have to go with it. Other times we're going to push really hard for specific things. So yeah, I think there's a lot of conversations there.
Hi, Zane from Vanti. First of all, thank you for one of the more illuminating conversations I've had in this event so far. My question was around your opinion on the middleware layer where you're doing this consolidation, normalization of data and exporting out. You've spoken a lot around MQTT. I understand that's fit for purpose for ingesting and pushing data out into other systems, but what is your plans, or what are your plans or intentions around perhaps getting to a control stage? And do you still feel like at that point, MQTT is still the right way to go as a protocol in terms of pushing control back into the building? For example, as it's a REST-based protocol, if you need to make sure that the lights off instruction you've said has actually been followed. It's a more convoluted process for MQTT rather than some other approaches. So is the focus right now just on being able to get to at least a consolidated point to ingest? And what's the plan for future feeding control back into your portfolio?
So though you're looking at me, I don't think I can answer it. So Johnny won't help me.
Yeah. Do you want to answer it? Or shall I?
You can start.
Yeah, a joint approach then. The whole reason for getting the data out in MQTT is so that it goes to the platform and you can carry out whatever you need to do there. So yes, it could come back down through MQTT. We're not talking about running control loops over that. This would be your normal integration. So back in the olden days when everything went to the BMS and it did the interfaces, we have the application sitting on the cloud now. So what we want to do is we want to get the data out in that normalized format. And then it will come back in the same format. So it's publish and subscribe. And then it can be used in the applications. It makes the building flexible. So if you start to think about spaces where you might, and now we're rejigging how we're using spaces all the time. We have to be very flexible. So if the services design is flexible, and we have made that available, we can actually start to change the sensors that the AVs or fan coil units use by pushing that down back through the platform, rather than having to get someone to come along and re-engineer it in the field. So that to me is a big step forward, allows a lot more flexibility for clients as they go through the normal churn in their building. John, I don't know what you wanted to say on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. But yeah, I think from our side, yeah, there's kind of two types of kit that we integrate with at the moment, where it's either, we'll go the traditional integration route and it will be a backnet or a Modbus, and we have to then convert that to MQTT. And I do think the longevity of that, I don't think will last, because it is adding an extra step in, which, it works to get that normalised data, but you're adding another layer in and doing certain things. Where you probably walked around, you see most of the controls and certainly most of the systems we're starting to, around lighting, HVAC is going to do it, out of the box, is going to do it from that level. The difficulty is around, the control. The control piece will be there needs to be some logic still there at the moment that is not going to happen at the MQTT level, but you are going to have to, you're going to have to send the control down, the commands down, but then, make sure there's a relinquishing of control after a certain time. And I think, at least for the next few years, that's still going to happen in that, that controller level, I would say. I think we're away from doing that whole control via MQTT. It needs to be set up in the kind of most efficient way still. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Sorry, can I ask just a quick follow-up? Are you okay then with, I understood your point around doing it in the cloud. Are you okay then with certain control parts going out of the building and then back? Or would you prefer at some point in the future for all of that to exist in building?
If you have the broker in the building, it's not leaving the building. Anyway, so there's a certain amount that you can do in the building. What we would propose is life safety functionality stays where life safety functionality needs to be, and the hardwired interlocks are all in place. So none of that life safety stuff, translates onto a platform anywhere. You would still have functionality in the building. We're talking about changing the sensor that's being used. Connections are much more resilient now. As I say, we're not talking about putting fast control loops on a platform somewhere. That's going to be at the edge device. So, yeah.
Lyndon?
Yeah. What legislation exists today that will drive smart building enablement? What mandatory legislation do you see coming up?
Well, the race to meet the carbon targets is something that's definitely going to help. And we talked a little bit earlier about Neighbours UK. for years we've been delivering buildings with a designed energy efficiency, which none of the buildings ever meet, because we run off and go to the next glossy building and the building isn't under load. It can't possibly have been commissioned. So actually being able to run those analytics and in near real time understand what's happening in the building and make those changes, almost moving to almost a pace of continuous commissioning, is going to really help us to reach those targets. The other thing is, of course, we'll learn from that data, and that can feed back into our designs so that our next designs are better. It can inform how we're using the building. We're moving to flexible working, so do we still want to have 5 floors open with 2 or 3 people on each floor and we're servicing all the floors? Do we want to run some metrics and actually start looking at what's the energy consumption per head count rather than per square metre? All these things are we're much more able to do them when we have a smart building approach where we're comparing metrics from different systems. And I think that it's actually sharpened people's minds. Originally, when people thought about smart buildings, they thought only about the use cases for users, enhancing the user experience in the building. People are becoming much more focused on carbon reduction. And of course, Neighbours UK is only helping that, because you actually have to report on the consumption figures. It's not some theoretical value. So from a building performance point of view, from an environmental point of view, it's really going to drive this industry.
I can see Neighbours just being the start to this. The concept is we're not designing for compliance. We're not theoretical. We're looking at the real-time performance. That concept needs to grow. And Neighbours has started the idea, and it's great that they're doing that, and they're certified buildings with their rating system. But I feel that there is more to come in that area.
Does anybody else have any more questions?
Hi, I'm Alek Grahapot. Smart buildings is a very complex topic, and I know that there are some industry experts, but what I noticed from my experience is that what's client's aspiration, and then designer specification, and then contractor's understanding, and then final product is very much different. And there are a lot of nuances, a lot of things that are not very clear. And I was just wondering, is it possible to develop a standard via BCIA or CIPC that will give us different stages how smart we can have, how smart the building can be?
I think there are attempts at that standard. I think the word standard is very difficult. It could be legislation, it could be anything, but smart score and wide score all attempt to say your building is this. It's really how you compare that with the data that's real. So I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I think what we see, our clients have got quite really different use cases. So someone who's got a government building versus a document storage building versus a landlord, what's smart to them is very different, and it's going to be really hard to put some hard and fast rules on what makes something smart, what doesn't make something smart. It's some of these smart score things are trying to do that, but it's you might get a point for having a smart charging point, but if everyone walks to work, then it's kind of pointless. It's very hard to quantify some of those things, and I do think it needs to be done, but it's going to be how you do that is going to be really difficult. I'm not sure quite where it's going to come from or who's going to want to drive that really.
There probably needs to be an education piece as well, because certainly from our side, what we see as regards to specifications, just like you mentioned there, that there's very different levels of complexity that are in there, and some of those specifications are not the greatest. I think that probably does need to change, but that's going to come down in time with education.
And that really does come down to that early works we talk about, is getting the documentation correct so that it can pass down the supply chain, and compliance means that the contractors delivered what was asked for.
But it could be the case that the first step would be the smart enablement of a building, so that, you know, the things that we were talking about standardising how those systems sit on the network, how they expose their data. If that's standardised, at least we've got the stepping stone to then achieve the use cases that any client might want, because we've enabled the building for that purpose. And perhaps that's just where we need to start from, because as John said, different clients have different requirements, and different building types have very different requirements. So the use cases for a hospital will be very different from, you know, a commercial building to a university, to a school. So the use cases are different. The way you deal with the devices, the way you deal with the data, now that's standard. So maybe that's where we start.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much today. Thank you everyone.